The material world is thought to be ruled by the demiurge, who is a false god who entraps souls in the cycle of birth and death. And the seven classical planets are basically the archons, they are the jailers. So the soul basically descends through the planetary spheres at birth, and they take on the qualities from each planet, sort of like how, we inherit things from our parents, we inherit their traits, their DNA. And I think that the soul needs to shed these planetary influences in reverse order to really escape from reincarnation and return to the pleroma, divine fullness, where we're really from. So, I mean, man is basically a star bound to a body, and the body is a tomb. So we need to awaken to liberate ourselves from the, never-ending cycle of reincarnation, from the snake eating its own tail, from the infinity symbol, from the eight. I talk about the number eight a lot. It's the reincarnation loop, you know? So your chart is basically your avatar's code, and transits are basically energetic updates to the matrix. So this is, I mean, what we see right now on stellium, that's basically the transits for today. And reincarnation is when we get re-uploaded into the system. So astrology is basically a tool, you know, we can use it to become conscious of the code, to become conscious of the script. So I think that it's a map, it's a map, it's a tool. It can help us become lucid within the dream. It's a map of karma and ancestral memory. And it's a system, it's a whole spiritual system. And if we can master it, if we can really understand it, then I think that we can really just transcend our conditioning. And we can transcend the barriers, the boundaries that have been imposed upon us. So I think the key is conscious engagement, using astrology to awaken rather than sleepwalk through faded loops. And Pisces is actually the most important constellation. We are currently in the age of Pisces. Pisces rules the English language, it rules Christianity, it rules every religion on earth, it rules everything. And I mean, Pisces is basically the portal, you know? It rules the feet. Right now, we're in, Pisces season because it's April 16, 2025. And there is a beautiful stellium in Pisces right now. I mean, first off, we have Venus over here. Venus is basically Ishtar, it's Inanna, it's Aphrodite. And we have Mercury, Saturn, and Neptune. Neptune is Poseidon. Neptune is basically the ruler of Pisces. Mercury is Nebu. Mercury is Hermes. It's the messenger. It's the trickster. Saturn is Cronus. Saturn is the wise time lord, the ruler of karma, of reincarnation, of restrictions, of, limits, of boundaries, of hard work, of perseverance, and of like responsibility. Saturn rules the government, Saturn rules traditions, Saturn enforces and it imposes, restrictions, limits, boundaries. Saturn imposes structure, Saturn rules structure. Saturn in numerology is the number 8, And I talk about the number eight a lot, you know? And right now, Saturn is invisible from our view on Earth. It's invisible from our observational view. And Venus over here, I mean, they're all in a conjunction. And Venus is actually exalted in Pisces. So Venus is really comfortable in Pisces. You know, Venus in Pisces is basically like a dreamer, you know? She is really just floating there. And Pisces is the collective unconscious. It's the ocean of dreams, of symbols, of, you know, visions, of fantasy. Neptune dissolves boundaries. Venus seeks unity. Venus is actively trying to just relate to the others, and it's like she's always trying to tap into the collective. Mercury is the one who's bringing the messages up to the surface, but he's bringing the messages from the unseen, you know, because Pisces is the unseen. Pisces is the hidden. It's the, you know, the unconscious, the spiritual, the mystical, the intangible, the limitless, the boundless, you know? And Saturn tries to impose form on the formless. Saturn tries to give some sort of shape to the formless. So Saturn and Pisces is all about initiation through suffering and spiritual tests. So it's like it's trying to crystallize the mystical domain. Mercury in Pisces is initiation through, you know, being the channel. It's always trying to channel. It's the channeler. It's communication from beyond the surface. Venus in Pisces is longing for divine union. It's beauty, you know, it's looking for beauty that heals, and it's looking for love as sacrifice and redemption. Whereas Neptune in Pisces is basically the high priest, the high priestess archetype. It's dissolution into source. It's, you know, constantly trying to dissolve all boundaries, all barriers. It's like, you know, the collective unconscious. It's trying to blur all the boundaries between, you know, us as individuals and the collective as a whole. So this is like the archetype, you know, this conjunction is basically the archetype of the dream walker, you know? And I mean, Mercury is in detriment in Pisces. Mercury doesn't like being in Pisces. You know, Mercury governs communication, how we speak, how we write, how we listen. It also governs our thought processes, like logic, analysis, and the way we learn, the way we express information. And like, you know, in Pisces, you know, Mercury speaks in riddles. It speaks in metaphors. It speaks in the language of the collective unconscious. It speaks in the language of dreams and fantasies. It speaks in the language of the unseen. And you know, Mercury in Pisces isn't linear, it's not practical, it's not precise, it's not logical, and it's not used to that because Mercury is usually linear, it's all about being practical, it's all about conveying precise information, it's all about, you know, logic, it's all about, you know, following the linear path. So that's why Mercury struggles in Pisces. And you know, Mercury in Pisces is casting spells. It's it's the trickster. It's casting spells. It's basically hypnotizing the masses using words. You know, words are ultimately spells. The English language is all about casting spells, and Pisces rules the English language. You know, that's why the English language is so water-based. You know, it's full of terms related to water, especially when it comes to money and the economy. You know, water controls the economy, water controls everything. Most of the world's trade still involves water. You know, they don't use airplanes to transport our stuff. You know, they export stuff using ships. So yeah. And Mercury really struggles over here. So Saturn isn't in detriment, but it really does feel uncomfortable in Pisces because Saturn always wants to define things. Saturn always wants to, impose a structure, a framework, whereas Pisces just wants to dissolve everything, So, you know, Saturn tries to adapt to the murky waters of Pisces. Pisces is obviously it's a mutable water sign. And it's sort of like when you sketch something in the sand, you know that the waves will erase it. So, no matter how hard Saturn works, I think that the waves of Pisces will always erase the structures, the boundaries, the limits, the restrictions that Saturn tries to impose. And Saturn is the ruler of time, it's the ruler of karma. So, I mean, it's really blurry in Pisces because, Pisces is the domain of dreams, it's the unseen, it's the mystical, it's the intangible, it's the fantasy, you know, it's the visions. But ultimately, everything needs some sort of container, even the intangible, even the waters of Pisces need some sort of framework. They need some sort of structure. So Saturn in Pisces is all about teaching us that even dreams need discipline. Saturn imposes discipline. Saturn rules discipline. So if we want to survive in this world, then we need to learn how to anchor, you know, the unseen domain. We need to learn how to anchor the ineffable, the dreams, the visions, the intangible. We really need to learn how to anchor all of that. We need some sort of structure. We need discipline. Even if we have a lot of interesting dreams and fantasies, we don't want to get lost in all of that. We don't want to just lose ourselves to the dream, to the fantasy, the self-sacrifice. We don't want to be completely delulu. We need Saturn. We need the rules. We need the structure. We need the discipline. We need to work hard to achieve our dreams. Venus in Pisces is exalted. It's looking for, spiritual relationships that transcend boundaries, that go beyond barriers. She's basically looking for a dream to drown in. Venus is very romantic. It's always like idolizing the other. It's self-sacrificing. It's transcending, but it needs to be grounded. Like it needs to be a bit more practical and grounded. And Pisces is ruled by Neptune. Pisces is ultimately water as memory, but not as liquid. It doesn't flow, it absorbs, it refracts, and it disappears. It slips through our fingers. Pisces is murky, it's very blurry, it's misty, it lacks clarity, it's limitless, it's boundless, and intangible. And Neptune rules the sea, but also illusion. It rules dreams, it rules fantasy. Everything in Pisces isn't linear, it's cyclical, it's spiral bound. Even time itself isn't actually linear, according to some people. And this conjunction basically trines Mars in Cancer. Can you guys see Mars in Cancer? Mars is over here in the early stages of Cancer. And I mean, Mars is the warrior, whereas Saturn is Cronus or Ninurta. Mercury is Hermes, that's Nebu, the messenger, who's in detriment, obviously. And Neptune is Poseidon. Poseidon, Neptune, the mystic, the collective unconscious, and the self. It's the like the totality of everything. Whereas Mercury is the trickster, it's the messenger, it's Quicksilver. And in the mutable waters of Pisces, we know that, a Venus over here is Aphrodite. It's Inanna, it's Ishtar, the lover, the anima, it's copper. It's beauty, it's love, it's art, it's creativity, it's romance, it's fertility. It's very conductive and harmonizing in Pisces. And all of these planets over here are basically trying to send a message to Mars and Cancer. So from the waters of Pisces, that message travels to Mars and Cancer. And we have to remember that the trine is like a flowing river. The message from Pisces is one of like divine intuition, whereas Mars is all about protective action. Mars in Cancer isn't the warrior for conquest. It's more about protecting the home, protecting his land, protecting his family, his emotions, his mom, his ancestry. So Mars is like the son of Hera. It's guarding, his people with emotion rather than blades. It's not bloodthirsty. It's not about conquest or power or even aggression. So I mean, the Pisces stellium, it speaks in dreams, whereas Mars listens and acts. Mars is the one who's basically, you know, trying to heal from action. He's taking action. He's bold enough and courageous enough to take some sort of action to heal. And Mars is in detriment in Cancer. I mean, he's kind of like the chariot in going through the underworld. And this trine is all about surrender and emotional courage, where it's about, descending into our own watery underworld, like Persephone or Inanna when she sacrificed herself to descend into the underworld. I mean, this trine is basically encouraging us to feel and heal through tenderness. Because, Mars in Cancer is soft, it's not assertive or aggressive. And we have to remember that Inanna willingly descended into the underworld. And the conjunction over here in Pisces is basically all about making a conscious commitment spiritually. And Mars is basically, it's actions, taking action, it's war, it's courage, it's drive. And it's all about, just protecting what we care about the most. In Cancer, that would be family, our roots, our heritage, our ancestors, our emotions, our mother. And the ruler of Cancer is actually the moon in Libra over here. And Libra is ruled by Venus. Venus is over here in Pisces. And going back to Pisces, we can see that the sun over here is standing right next to Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer, it's the centaur. And I mean, it's all about healing the generational trauma, the generational wound. The sun is Apollo, it's Shamash. And in Pisces, the light coming out of the sun is diffused. It's like going through water, and it carries sorrow as well as compassion. This conjunction over here also trines Mars in Cancer. Chiron is like trying to teach the warrior Mars to cry, and through crying, Chiron wants it to heal others. It's sort of like an initiation wound. It's the wounded healer. It's healing through action. It's authenticity. It's compassionate leadership. And Chiron is also like related to, obviously disbelief. A lot of people have some sort of wound related to their belief system, to their spiritual idea, beliefs, to their like their dreams, their visions, their illusions, you know, um, and even to their fears, because Pisces is totally connected to fear, fear that comes from illusions, irrational fear. You know, there there's just this lack of clarity. And it's so blurry in Pisces. Everything is so blurry and misty. And because of that, there's a lot of fear. Pisces doesn't just rule our dreams and our fantasies, it also rules our fears, our nightmares. And the sun is basically gold. It's our vitality, it's the sovereignty, the consciousness, the identity, it's the life force, the ego. So the conjunction with the wounded healer usually means that, you know, there is this big wound related to like our identity, the way that we present ourselves to the world, consciousness itself, basically. The trine to Mars basically means that the wound isn't necessarily a weakness, but initiation. And this echoes the sacrifice of Inanna and Chiron, you know. Chiron was a warrior who fought, who was able to just, you know, try to heal others through feeling. Instead of like aggressively fighting, he was all about feeling. He tried his best to heal other creatures. Chiron is the centaur. It's all about healing other people, other entities. It's the wounded healer archetype. In Pisces, I think that there is a lot of emotional overwhelm and even spiritual dissociation. And there are many struggles related to boundaries and even authority. And there's this longing for divine union, but that can lead to sacrifice of the self. So that's pretty interesting. So Chiron, the wounded healer, meets Mars in Cancer, the sacred warrior. It's sort of like when Chiron met Athena. Whereas this conjunction over here is the dream walker, basically. And next up, I'm going to talk about the moon. It's in Libra, and it apparently forms a conjunction with Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus. Can you guys see that? And there's also, going back to the Pisces stellium, it actually sextiles Pluto and Capricorn. And Pluto in Capricorn opposes Mars in Cancer. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces. So Pluto in Capricorn is actually, it's, the underworld itself. It's the death card in the tarot decks. It's in the early degrees of Pisces. And it's like Hades or Ereshkigal, it's the dark night of the soul. So Pluto is basically brooding deep beneath the mountain of Capricorn. Capricorn is the mountain goat. And Pluto is basically a representation of ancient, like power of ancestral bones. And he actually extends a hand to the Pisces stellium over here, the conjunction over here. And Pluto is like whispering secrets to Saturn about the weight of legacy. And Pluto is also whispering to Mercury about forgotten names and lost tongues, basically. And he whispers to Neptune about oceans that drown and cleanse, sort of like what happened in the Great Flood. And he whispers to Venus about underworld love. Venus is all about unconditional love, so Venus actually likes that. So this sextile is like a pact of initiation. The dreams of Pisces coming out of this stellium are basically being tested in the crucible of death and time in Capricorn over here. And the stellium, it obviously it also sextiles Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus. Pisces is basically, it prays and dreams, whereas Taurus is the one who's doing, the answering and the manifesting. So Taurus answers and manifests. And Saturn over here sets the timelines on the order, the structure, the discipline. Mercury casts spells because Mercury is the trickster. Mercury is language, and we know that it's in detriment in Pisces, so it's casting spells. And Neptune resolves boundaries, whereas Venus paints desires. And in Taurus, we can see that Jupiter is basically right there near the horns of the bull. Jupiter is basically providing abundance and expansion. Jupiter is Zeus, Jupiter is Marduk. Whereas Uranus is basically the rebel. Uranus is sending a lightning strike of revelation. It's electrifying. It's basically the divine awakening. It's like Prometheus when he stole fire from the Titans, from Zeus, and he gave it to humanity. So Uranus is, it's sudden, unpredictable shifts, changes, and it's the rebel, it's revolution, it's innovation, it's technology. Pluto and Capricorn over here, opposing Mars in Cancer over here. It's like the test of Inanna's descent to the underworld. It's like when our emotions have to meet the hard edge of like shadow, grief, and ancestral trauma. Because Pluto in Capricorn is the dark night of the soul. So it's like when Inanna was stripped of her titles at each gate, or when Persephone was taken, was abducted basically and transformed. So this opposition is kind of like calling us to surrender instead of resist. And through surrendering, I think that there will be some sort of rebirth process. So it's pretty nice, even though it's opposition, the aspect itself is kind of nice, to be honest. And I mean, going back to Pisces, the Pisces sextile with Taurus kind of reminds me of a rising phase, like when Inanna returned upward, you know, when she returned with wisdom and when Persephone brought seasonal cycles to the earth. And the inconjunction between the moon in Libra and the planets in Taurus is awkward, you know? The moon is basically Selene, it's Luna, it's Sin, it's Nina, and I mean, it's Nana. The moon is Nana. I mean, it's Nana. And the moon over here, we can see that it's basically drifting in the sky of Libra. It's trying to balance the scales of beauty and justice, obviously in silver hands because the moon is silver. But across the sky, unfortunately, we have Jupiter and Uranus, and they are, you know, they're shaking the ground basically. You know, Taurus is fixed Earth, and Uranus and Jupiter are bringing so much like upheaval. Jupiter is all about, you know, abundance and expansion, whereas Uranus is just disrupting everything. It's the cosmic disruptor. It's changing the status quo. It's, you know, a global currency reset, stock market crashes. Whereas Jupiter is all the people getting rich off of the currency resets, like the currencies that are being revaluated right now, the RV, all the RVs basically, and the people getting rich off like crypto, XRP, and other schemes basically get rich quickly and all of that. You know, Jupiter is all those crypto guys, those tech bros who are taking over social media right now. So it's all of that. You know, I mean, there are a lot of new money families coming out of nowhere thanks to all the changes in the economic system. Uranus is basically restructuring the economy, the banking sector, the currencies, and Jupiter is all the people who are getting rich off it. And the inconjunction is awkward because Libra has to, like, it has to balance its scales to hold lightning because Uranus is basically the lightning, you know? It's shaking the ground. Like, there is so much revolution, so many changes, so much rebellion coming out of Uranus, and there's so much prosperity, abundance coming out of Jupiter. So the moon struggles to integrate all of that energy. That's why there's an inconjunction. You know, the moon doesn't know how to balance so much upheaval, you know, so much sudden upheaval. It's sudden, it's unpredictable. So the Libra is being asked to really just balance the scales to hold the lightning and abundance all at once. So there is a natural tension between peace and disruption, because you know Uranus is the disruption, and the moon is silver. The moon is the, you know, it's the intuition, it's the emotions, subconscious. It's reflective, and obviously it's changeable. It governs the tides. So the moon is very relevant because we are currently in a mutable water season, you know, Pisces season. And Mars in Cancer, well, I mean, Cancer is ruled by the moon. But we can see here that Mars in Cancer also sextiles like Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus in the bull. over here.